Well, good morning and welcome to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center's Curator's Corner. My name is Thorin Tritter. I am the Museum and Programming Director at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, which is located in Glen Cove, New York. I want to wish you all a safe and healthy new year. This is our first program in 2022, and I hope you all had a nice holiday, a nice break, and I wish you well for 2022. Before we start, I want to mention a couple of things. First, our building is open to the public, so I hope you'll be inspired by this program or some of our earlier programs to come to our museum and see the objects and items in our collection in person. I also want to encourage you to pose any questions or comments that come up during my presentation using the Q&A feature of Zoom. You should be able to find the Q&A button and just type in your question or comment, and I'll be sure to make time to respond at the end of the program. And finally, I'd like to ask you for your financial support. We just held our end of year fundraising campaign, but there is still time for you to make a gift for 2021 that would help ensure our continued operation. So please send your checks by mail to the address you see there on the screen, or you can always go to our website, www.hmtcli.org, and click on the Give Now button. I want to focus today on a Nazi flag, but one that's distinctive because of how it was altered by American troops and who those American troops were. The flag I'm going to talk about is currently not on display in our building, but we are working to get it installed, and here's the artist rendering of where it's going to go in our 5th gallery. But before I go forward and show images of the flag, let me say that I'm well aware of the hate that is associated with Nazi flags and about the impact the swastika still has in our society today. The flag I'm going to talk about shows how that hateful image of the Nazis was co-opted by American soldiers who turned the symbol of hate into a symbol of American efforts to liberate Europe. But I do want to warn you, of course, that I'll be showing images of the Nazi flag with the swastika, and that I realize that'll be upsetting and disturbing to some. Okay, here is the flag that we are going to put in our gallery. Here you see the two sides of it, and you can see it's been adorned with names written in of both various names of cities, and also with names of people that have been put in blue ink around the center of the flag. I'll come to talk about exactly what's written more closely in just a minute. But before I do that, I want to thank Ron and Jeff Fisch, who donated the flag to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. Their father, Harold Fisch, served in the US Army in World War II, and like many veterans, brought home various things from the war, including this flag. We are grateful both to Ron and Jeff Fisch for donating this and other objects to our collection, but we're also grateful for Harold Fisch's service to the nation. Here you can see a portrait done by Harold Fisch during the war. Originally from Brooklyn, he joined the Army in June of 1943 at the age of 19. He went on to serve in the infantry in England, Normandy, northern France, the Ardennes, Rhineland, Central Europe, and Germany. This is a picture of Harold Fisch on the outskirts of Dusseldorf, having pulled down a sign celebrating a Nazi construction project. It was in Dusseldorf, according to what he later told his sons, that he and his buddies pulled down a Nazi flag that was flying over a police station and then began to decorate it in their own way. And you can see that Fisch and his company took the Nazi flag and turned it into something that celebrated their own accomplishments. This zooming in on the center of one side of the flag, where they added the names of the cities where they had trained and fought. It starts with the series of names of it starts with 4 cities in England, all located around Birmingham, in the middle of England, where they trained in the spring of 1944. Then there are a series of names of French cities, including Ferrières, Saint-Lô, and Coutances. These are all towns in Normandy, reflecting the fact that Fisch and his unit were part of the D-Day landing on June 6th of 1944. The other names on the flag show that his unit moved south from Normandy, fighting in Torsay, outside the cathedral city of Rhine, then east in 3 areas around Paris, and then south again, fighting in Somme. From the area around Paris, they then moved towards Germany, fighting in Bettenburg, then Belgium, and then Dusseldorf. The places on the flag are not a complete list of where Harold Fisch's unit fought, but here you see the locations mentioned on the flag translated onto a map, and I think it gives you a sense of his unit's sweep through France and into Germany. As I started digging into the military actions that took place in the cities listed on the flag, I found something interesting. Even though Harold Fisch's papers say that he served in the 112th Infantry Division, all the cities listed on the flag were important sites for another military unit, a secret unit that was only declassified in the 1990s. This was a tactical deception unit that operated during World War II, which was officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, but was known more colloquially as the Ghost Army or the Phantom Army. The mission was to impersonate other Allied army units to deceive the Germans into thinking that Allied attacks were going to come from one direction when in reality they were launched from somewhere else. Using inflatable vehicles, elaborate camouflage, fake radio transmissions, and sound trucks to create the noise of different divisions, they staged more than 20 battlefield deceptions, often operating very close to the front lines. There's one other clue on Harold Fisch's discharge papers that he was part of this secret unit. His discharge papers list his military specialty as being a painter. The Ghost Army particularly recruited artists who could decorate the inflatable objects to make them look real, and who could help create the camouflage and other illusions to make the deceptions work. Harold, however, never mentioned to his sons that he was part of this Ghost Army. That is not, excuse me, not entirely a surprise. The Ghost Army was top secret. Following the war, the unit's soldiers were sworn to secrecy, records were classified, and any clues about their work were hidden away. Except for a newspaper article right after the war, no one spoke publicly about the unit until 40 years later. The first crack in the secret story came in an April 1985 issue of the Smithsonian Magazine, where the illustrator Arthur Shillstone shared his part in the war as a member of the 603rd Camouflaged Engineers. Overall, however, the operations of the Ghost Army remained officially classified until 1996, only getting declassified 51 years after the end of the war. A great deal of research has been done since the 1990s about this secret unit's work, perhaps most notably by Rick Beyer, who directed a PBS documentary that came out in 2013, and also co-authored the most exhaustive book on the subject with Elizabeth Sales. Rick Beyer is also president of the Ghost Army Legacy Project, which has become an incredible online resource, including, among other things, it has a roster of the soldiers who served in the Ghost Army, and I am very grateful for Rick's help in sharing his research with me for this program. A look at the other side of our flag, which is covered with the names of soldiers from Harold Fisch's unit, shows that they were all members of Company D of the 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion. People like Harold Levinsky, a machine shop operator from the Bronx, or Will Ormond, a decorator and window dresser from Washington, D.C., Bruce Zilmer, a commercial artist from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and various others. One other I'll mention, Harold Dahl, a sculptor from Towako, New Jersey, who was among the many on this name, on the flag. Amazingly, some of Harold Dahl's letters home still survive. In one from August 8th of 1944, when the unit was preparing to retake Paris, he wrote, "It is quite a thing to see the refugees on their way back to their homes, some of which are in a sorry state. not only because of battle, but it seems the Germans had a way of smashing glassware and furniture and whatnot on their way out. The people certainly are glad to see the Americans, even though we must have been the ones who leveled many a poor soul's home. I wish I had a 5 and dime store with me. Why? So I could give it all away bit by bit and watch the people's faces. Especially, I would like to give toys to the children. Poor kids, they have not enough to eat or cover their backs, much less to play with. Harold Dahl could not write about the actions of his unit when sending the letters home, but he captures in this little section some of the trauma that he was witnessing. There is one signature that's notably missing from our flag, the signature of Harold Fisch, the man who brought the flag home after the war. Even though he didn't sign the flag, he is on the roster of Company D of the 603rd Engineers Camouflage Battalion. And we know that he used his artistic skills after the war, becoming a graphic artist and working on the packaging of Wonder Bread and some of the art for the Howdy Doody show. One of the most important missions for Harold Fisch and the rest of the Ghost Army came in Operation Viersen in March of 1945, when the 9th Army prepared to cross the Rhine River into Germany. Fisch and the Ghost Army were called on to make it appear that the army was going to cross near Dusseldorf, instead of the real crossing, which was 40 miles downriver in Wesel. Here is the hand-drawn map that was created for the official history of the unit and kept secret until 1996. You can see the Ghost Army, marked in red squares, pretended to be the US 79th and 30th Infantry Divisions, allowing the real troops, marked with the blue arrows, to flow northward and east up to Wesel. The effort required the 1,000 men of the 23rd to use every resource at their disposal to impersonate 2 full divisions, some 40,000 men in the 79th and 30th. They started with creating phony trucks and radio chatter that suggested a major force was on the move. When they reached the Rhine, they set up more than 600 inflatable tanks and artillery units, although partially hidden in camouflage to make it look like they were real. This is a rare photograph of one of the areas they created in the Rhine Campaign with the inflatable vehicles. All of the vehicles in the photo are fake, they're inflatable. But you see that the unit made them look real by adding tracks in the grass and mud. Of course, the unit did much more than just put up the inflatable trucks and mark patterns into the soil. The sonic crews worked around the clock, playing the sounds of truck engines, troop encampments, and heavy construction to mimic the sound of bridge building engineer units. They even used flash canisters to make it appear that they were using the artillery, drawing real fire from the German forces. The result was just what General Patton wanted. German units converged across the river from the deception. Meanwhile, the real troops who attacked across the Rhine 40 miles to the north met only a disorganized resistance and suffered only 36 casualties. It's more than 0 for sure, but for an operation involving thousands of men, only having 36 casualties was a shockingly small number. There were other important missions before the Rhine Campaign, but it was after the successful deception during that Rhine Campaign that Harold Fisch entered Dusseldorf and pulled down this flag that's now part of our collection. I should add that recognition about the significance of the Ghost Army's mission led to the opening in 2020 of an exhibition about it at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. They brought together veterans and objects from the war to try to give a sense of what this unit, the Ghost Army, did. And one of the items on display in that exhibition at the National World War II Museum was a liberation flag, much like ours. Indeed, it has many of the same cities and many of the same names, places like Coventry or Treviers or Saint-Lô, Coutances, Paris, Luxembourg, and Dusseldorf, among many others. The flag on display in New Orleans also had the signatures of men from the unit, much like our flag, but it included at least one that's not on our flag. The flag shown in New Orleans included the signature of Harold Fisch, who included not only his name, but a small self-portrait. It may seem ironic that the flag brought home by Harold Fisch did not include his own name, while the one in the National World War II Museum does. But then again, perhaps Harold felt no need to have his name on his own flag, instead wanting to have the names of the other guys in his unit. He didn't need to remember himself. He wanted to remember those other names. I will note that the soldier who donated the flag to the exhibition in New Orleans, Joseph Richard Spence, does not have his name on his flag either. Like Harold Fisch, Joe Spence did not need the flag to remember himself. He wanted it to remember the other guys. However, Spence's name is on Harold Fisch's flag, on the flag in our museum. In a real way, these two flags are sister flags, or even two halves of the same whole. Our flag lists about 17 towns and cities, while the one at the National World War II Museum includes 37 locations. So theirs has a much fuller list of where this unit operated. On the other hand, the flag on the exhibition in New Orleans only includes the names of 12 soldiers, while our flag includes 28 members of Company D. Together, they provide a great deal of information about this secret unit. One last comment about these types of liberation flags. As our flag and the one on display at the World War II Museum suggest, it was not uncommon for American troops to pull down Nazi flags and make them their own by signing their names and listing their battles. Every now and again, I see articles or get emails about other similar flags. One email I saw pretty recently was from a man in Florida whose father had served in the 8th Armored Division of the 9th Army, which was one of the units that crossed the Rhine near Wesel against a weak German defense because of the Ghost Army's work further south near Dusseldorf. The email included this picture of a flag he had found that was signed by 20 members of the 171st Combat Engineers Battalion, who had built one of the bridges across the Rhine in that action. They, too, much like Harold Fisch's unit, had found a Nazi flag, tore it down, and turned it into a flag of liberation. The man who sent it to me, said he mounted the flag and has the names of 20 people who signed it highlighted around on the edges. Or here's another example. This is a flag that was sent home by Eddie Littlejohn, a Native American from Minnesota who served under General Patton. In much the same way as Harold Fisch did, Eddie Littlejohn took a Nazi flag and added the places where he fought, later donating it to the La Crosse County Historical Society. And one more example. This is a flag that was captured by members of the 13th Armored Division in Bavaria in May of 1945, and then signed by 144 members of the division. The photo shows it being held by one of the signers, Wayne Tucker, and a woman who found the flag for sale at an antique market in Princeton, New Jersey, and then launched an effort to track down the information about it. Our flag from Harold Fisch is a bit different, because from 1945 until 1996, it was one of the very few pieces of evidence that provided a clue to the operations of the secret 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion that had been involved in deceiving the Nazis. Indeed, as I mentioned before, when speaking to Jeff Fisch, one of Harold Fisch's sons, he reported that his father was always very secretive and quiet about what he had done during World War II. He shared the flag with his children and some photographs from the war, but he never went into detail about the actions he was part of. His entire unit had been told never to say a word about what they had done, and so he stayed silent even to his children 40 years later. Now, however, since the details of this unit have been declassified, we can highlight the role of the men in Company D of the 603rd Engineers Camouflage Battalion, including Harold Fisch. And we can not only share the flag, but its full story, showing how the members of Harold's company successfully co-opted the Nazi flag of hate into a celebration of their unit's secret accomplishments in the liberation of Europe. I'm going to stop there. Thank you for joining me. If you have questions, please type them into the Q&A window. Before I answer them, let me, as always, remind you of some of our other upcoming programs. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., Dr. Linda Burghardt, HMTC's Scholar in Residence, is going to be presenting a talk about Washington Heights, the neighborhood in Upper Manhattan that became a notable haven for German and Austrian Jews fleeing Nazi persecution. She's going to speak about how this German-speaking enclave developed and what it meant for survivors after the war. Another program next Tuesday, January 11th at 6 p.m. We're holding the second program in our 2G Tuesday program. In this program, 2G Debbie Cohn, a child of a Holocaust survivor, is going to share the testimony of her mother, Ilse Loeb, who grew up in Vienna but was sent by her parents to the Netherlands in the wake of Kristallnacht. And although Ilse survived the war, she never saw her parents again. I hope you'll join us to hear Debbie describe her mother's story. And one more program to mention, on Sunday, January 16th at 12:30, we are going to be holding a virtual book talk with the author and historian Amy Butler Greenfield about her recent book, The Woman All Spies Fear. The book describes the life of Elizabeth Smith Friedman, a woman who was one of America's greatest code breakers, both from World War I and World War II, but whose story has largely been obscured by a combination of sexism and secrecy. So I hope you'll join us to learn more about her amazing story. You can find more details about all of these programs and our full list of upcoming programs on our website at www.hmtcli.org, and then click on the events tab. And as I said at the beginning, I hope you'll also make a donation. Go to our website and click on the Give Now button. Okay, let me see what questions you've got out there. I think there are a few that came in. Did any Ritchie boys sign flags or capture flags? Joseph asked. I don't believe the Ritchie boys did. I think most of the Ritchie boys were guys who were still based in the United States. I may be a little wrong about that, but I don't know of any flags particularly about that the Ritchie boys signed. Okay, a few other questions. Oh, not a question, but a comment. Seymour Nussbaum is still alive and is one of the last members of the Ghost Army. I see him virtually every week as part of the Judaica Thematica Society. That's great to know. Maybe I can try and reach out to him and share my story, but thank you for sharing that information with me. Okay, well, thanks very much for tuning in, and I hope to see you at some of our other programs soon. Be well, everybody.